The detection came on a Tuesday, Galactic Standard Time. Deep in the monitoring stations of the Kalthari Concordance, a simple ping changed everything. Sector 447, previously marked as a Death World zone, now showed signs of faster-than-light travel. Someone new had just joined the galaxy's community of spacefaring species. Ambassador Thel-Axis stood before the massive display screen in the Concordance Hall, her 4 arms crossed in a gesture of deep concentration. The insectoid diplomat had served the galactic community for 70 years, and in all that time, she had welcomed 19 new species into the fold. This should have been routine. It should have been exciting. Instead, something felt wrong. "The world is called Earth," reported Science Officer Krenva, his tentacles tapping against his datapad. "Third planet from a yellow star. The species calls itself humanity. They achieved basic FTL capability approximately 6 standard months ago." Council Director Venzar leaned forward from her seat, her translucent body shimmering with concern. As a member of the Harmonious, an empathic species capable of feeling the emotions of others across vast distances, she was always the first to sense when something was amiss. "I recommend caution," she said softly. "There is something unusual about this sector." Thel-Axis turned to face her. "Unusual how?" Venzar's form flickered, colors shifting from calm blue to troubled purple. "I cannot explain it precisely, but when I extend my awareness toward that region of space, I feel unease, dread even." The other council members shifted uncomfortably. The Harmonious were never wrong about such things. Their empathic senses had prevented countless conflicts and disasters over the millennia. If Venzar felt dread, there was a reason. "Nevertheless," Thel-Axis said firmly, "we have a duty. A new species has achieved FTL travel. We must make contact. We must welcome them to the Concordance." The vote was unanimous, though several members seemed reluctant. Within 3 days, a diplomatic vessel named the Peaceful Approach was prepared. Its crew consisted of representatives from 7 different species, all experienced diplomats who had made first contact dozens of times before. Captain Zalthor, a Vryn warrior with scales like polished armor, commanded the mission. The Peaceful Approach departed from Concordance Station with great ceremony. Messages of goodwill were prepared in 3,000 languages. Gifts representing the finest achievements of galactic civilization were carefully packed. Everything was ready for a warm welcome to the humans of Earth. The first sign of trouble came when they were still 40 light-years from human space. Captain Zalthor woke from sleep with his heart pounding, his body covered in cold sweat. In his dream, something had been chasing him through endless darkness. He could not see it, could not hear it, but he knew it was there, always getting closer. He had felt its eyes on his back, patient and inevitable. He dismissed it as stress. First contact missions always caused some anxiety. By the next day, 3 other crew members reported similar nightmares. The ship's counselor, a gentle being from the Whisper Collective, began holding meditation sessions. They helped, but only slightly. At 30 light-years from human space, the entire crew reported disturbed sleep. Some claimed they heard footsteps in empty corridors. Others swore they caught glimpses of shadows that moved wrong, that watched them when they turned away. "This is ridiculous," Zalthor announced at the morning briefing. "We are trained professionals. We have encountered gas giants, stellar phenomena, and cosmic radiation. We will not be undone by imagination." But it was not imagination. At 20 light-years from the human border, Security Officer Tennick refused to leave her quarters. When Zalthor went to check on her, he found her huddled in the corner, all 3 eyes wide with terror. "It knows we are coming," she whispered. "It knows, and it is waiting." "Waiting to hunt us. What knows?" Zalthor demanded. "There is nothing out here but empty space and distant stars." "The thing on Earth," Tennick said. The thing that calls itself human. Can't you feel it? Can't you feel its eyes on us?" Zalthor wanted to dismiss her words as madness, but his scales were standing on edge. Every warrior instinct he possessed was screaming at him to turn around, to flee, to put as much distance as possible between himself and whatever lay ahead. He called for a medical team. Tennick was sedated and placed in medical care. The doctor, a being with 12 fingers and infinite patience, ran every test available. There was nothing physically wrong with her. No toxins, no pathogens, no neurological damage. She was simply terrified beyond all reason. At 15 light years, 2 more crew members broke down, then 4, then 8. The ship's counselor approached Zalthor with trembling limbs. "Captain, I must recommend we abort this mission. I have never felt anything like this. It is as if we are approaching the den of some great predator, and every instinct we possess is telling us to run." "We are diplomats," Zalthor said through clenched teeth. "We do not run from first contact. We are also living beings," the counselor replied. "And right now, every cell in our bodies is screaming that we are in danger." Zalthor looked at his crew. These were experienced spacers, beings who had faced pirate raids, spatial anomalies, and the cold vacuum of death itself. Now they cowered like prey animals. Some could not stop shaking. Others stared at empty spaces, seeing things that were not there. And Zalthor himself felt it too. The dread had become a physical weight pressing down on his chest. In his mind, he could not shake the image of something watching him from the darkness. Something patient, something that knew how to wait, something that would chase him to the end of the universe if necessary, because that was what it did. That was what it had always done. At 10 light years from human space, the first officer attempted to mutiny. It took 6 crew members to restrain him as he tried to take control of the ship and turn it around. He was crying, begging, pleading for them to flee before it was too late. Zalthor stood on the bridge looking at the star map. Earth was there, so close now. He could reach it in 2 more jumps. He could make first contact, fulfill his mission, bring honor to himself and the Concordance. But his hands were shaking so badly he could not operate the controls. "Captain," his navigator said quietly, "I have children waiting for me at home. Please, I am begging you. Let us turn back." Zalthor looked into the navigator's eyes and saw true, primal terror. The kind of fear that no rational being should ever feel without a clear and present danger. And there was no danger. That was the most horrifying part. There was nothing there. No weapons locked onto them. No hostile vessels pursuing them. Just empty space and distant stars and a blue-green planet that housed a species that had only just learned to travel between stars. Yet every fiber of Zalthor's being screamed that death itself waited ahead. "Set course back to Concordance Station," he said quietly. "Maximum speed." The relief on the bridge was palpable. Several crew members openly wept. The navigator's hands flew across the controls, plotting their escape route with desperate precision. The peaceful approach turned around and fled. By the time they reached 15 light years away, the nightmares began to fade. At 20 light years, crew members began to relax. At 30 light years, they could finally breathe without feeling like something was watching them from the shadows. When they docked at Concordance Station, medical teams were waiting. Every crew member was examined thoroughly. The results were always the same. Nothing physically wrong, but deep psychological trauma that would take months or years to heal. Zalthor stood before the Concordance Council, his warrior's pride in tatters, and delivered his report. "I have never failed a mission before," he said. "But I cannot return to human space. None of us can. Something about that region, about that species, triggers a response in us that cannot be overcome. It is as if every prey instinct in our evolutionary history awakens and screams for us to flee." Thalaxis listened carefully. This should have been impossible. The Concordants had contacted thousands of species over millions of years. They had encountered beings of pure energy, hive minds that spanned solar systems, and creatures that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. Never before had mere proximity to a species caused such a reaction. "We will try again," she announced. "Perhaps a different crew, a different approach." They tried 6 more times over the next 3 months, ships from different species, with different crew compositions, using different routes of approach. The result was always the same. The closer they got to human space, the more overwhelming the dread became. At 10 light-years, crew members began breaking down. At 5 light-years, even the bravest warriors begged to turn back. One ship made it to within 2 light-years of Earth. The captain, a Yargeth named Krolvex, was a member of the galaxy's most feared predator species. The Yargeth had no natural enemies. They stood at the top of every food chain they encountered. Krolvex had personally fought in 3 wars and killed 17 opponents in honorable combat. He made it to 2 light-years before his crew found him in his quarters, curled into a ball, whimpering. "It hunts," he whispered when they tried to help him. "I see it now. It does not kill quickly like we do. It follows. It tracks. It waits. It chases its prey until the prey's hearts give out from exhaustion. Then it feeds. That is what waits for us near Earth. Not warriors, not honorable predators, but something worse, something that turned hunting into an art form." The crew had to drag him back to his quarters while he screamed about being chased by shadows. After that incident, the Concordants declared a 50 light-year buffer zone around human space. No ship was to approach closer without explicit authorization from the High Council. It was not a quarantine exactly, but it served the same purpose. Humanity was isolated, cut off from the galactic community by nothing more than the fear they inspired. On Earth, humans had no idea what was happening. Captain Maria Zhao stood on the bridge of the UESS Pioneer, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, and stared at the empty star charts with growing confusion. "We've been broadcasting for 3 months," she said to her first officer. "Standard first contact protocols, mathematical proofs, cultural information, everything the experts said we should include, and we've received nothing in response." "Maybe there's no one out there," the first officer suggested. "Maybe we're alone after all." But Maria did not believe that. She had seen the sensor readings. There were ships out there, dozens of them, moving through space with technologies far beyond Earth's current capabilities. They were out there. They could hear humanity's messages. They simply chose not to respond. "Keep broadcasting," Maria ordered, "and if they won't come to us, we'll go to them." Back on Concordant Station, Thalaxis stood before the High Council and delivered her recommendation. "We cannot ignore humanity. They are intelligent, they have achieved FTL capability, and they will not remain in their home system forever. We must find a way to make contact." "How?" demanded Council Director Vensar. "How do we contact a species that makes every other species in the galaxy feel like prey?" Thalaxis had no answer, not yet. But she knew that something would have to be done. Because humanity was reaching out to the stars, and the stars were fleeing in terror. 6 months had passed since the first failed contact attempt. In that time, the buffer zone around human space had become an unofficial law. Ships gave Sector 447 a wide berth, and pilots who accidentally strayed too close returned with tales of nightmares and shadows that whispered in empty corridors. Thalaxis had become obsessed with the human problem. Her quarters on Concordant Station were filled with data screens showing everything that could be observed about Earth from a safe distance. She watched their broadcasts, studied their languages, analyzed their culture from afar. What she found both fascinated and disturbed her. "They tell stories about monsters," she said to her research assistant one evening. "But the interesting part is that in their stories, the monsters are not always evil. Sometimes the humans themselves are the monsters. And sometimes they celebrate that fact." Her assistant, a young scholar named Pikrin, looked at the data with confusion. I do not understand. Why would a species create stories where they are the villains? Because they understand what they are, Thelaxis said quietly. They have always known. She pulled up another file, this one showing human military history. Wars that spanned continents, conflicts that lasted generations. Weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrorize. Psychological operations meant to break the enemy's will before the first shot was fired. Look at this, she said, pointing to a document about something called persistence hunting. Before they developed advanced weapons, humans would chase their prey for days, sometimes weeks. The prey animal would run until its body gave out, until it could not run anymore. And then the humans would catch it. They did not need to be faster. They just needed to never stop. Pikrin's fur stood on end. That is horrifying. Yes, Thelaxis agreed. And that is just one hunting method among many. They also use pack tactics, ambush strategies, and tools. They learn to throw projectiles with deadly accuracy. They learn to set traps. They learn to track prey across vast distances using nothing but footprints and broken branches. She pulled up more data. Human evolution charts, anatomical diagrams, neurological studies. Their eyes face forward, she continued, like all predators. But unlike most predators, they also have exceptional endurance. They can run for hours without stopping. They can survive in almost any climate. They can eat almost anything. They are adaptable in ways that most species are not. But surely that does not explain the dread, Pikrin said. Many species are predators. The Yargeth are far more dangerous in direct combat, yet we do not fear them the way we fear humans. Thelaxis nodded slowly. I have been thinking about that, and I believe I have a theory. She pulled up a new file, this one showing data from all the failed contact attempts, brain scans from crew members who had experienced the dread, biological response patterns, hormone levels. Every species that evolved as prey animals shows the strongest response, she explained. But even apex predator species feel unease. The Yargeth captain who made it closest to Earth experienced a complete psychological breakdown. Why would a predator fear another predator? Because humans are better at it, came a voice from the doorway. Thelaxis turned to see Council Director Venzar standing there, her form flickering with dark colors. The empathic being looked tired, as if the mere discussion of humans was draining. I have been meditating on this problem, Venzar continued, entering the room, trying to understand the nature of the dread, and I believe I have felt its source. She moved to the display, her translucent fingers passing through the holographic data. Humans are not just predators. They are persistence predators, social predators, tool-using predators. But more than that, they are thinking predators. They weaponized fear itself long before they reached the stars. Thelaxis leaned forward. Explain. Look at their warfare, Venzar said. They do not simply fight to win. They fight to break their enemies' spirits. They use propaganda, intimidation, and psychological tactics. They have entire branches of military strategy dedicated to making their opponents afraid, and they have been doing this for thousands of years. She pulled up images of human soldiers throughout history, warriors who painted their faces to look like skulls, armies that made noise to terrify their enemies before battle, weapons designed to make horrible sounds as they flew through the air. They understand fear, Venzar said softly. They understand it better than any species I have ever encountered, because they have used it as a weapon for as long as they have existed. And somehow, that understanding has left a mark, not just on them, but on reality itself around them. Pikrin made a sound of distress. Are you saying that humans are psychically projecting fear? Not exactly, Venzar said. But consider this. Every species in the galaxy evolved to recognize predators. We have instincts that tell us when something dangerous is near. Those instincts are built into our biology, hardwired into our brains over millions of years of evolution. She paused, her colors shifting to a deep, troubled purple. Humans are the perfect storm of every predatory trait that prey species learn to fear. Forward-facing eyes, persistence, intelligence, social cooperation, tool use, and something else, something I can only describe as inevitability. When you are near human space, your ancient prey instincts awaken and tell you that you are being hunted, and those instincts are never wrong. The room fell silent. Thalaxis felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. It made horrible sense. Humans were not intentionally projecting fear. They did not even know they were doing it. They were simply existing, and their very existence triggered the deepest, most primal fears of every other species in the galaxy. "We need to test this theory," Thalaxis said finally. "We need someone who has no fear response. Someone who cannot feel the dread." "The consuming swarm," Pikrin said suddenly. "They are a hive mind. They have no individual fear, no survival instinct beyond the survival of the collective." Thalaxis and Venzar exchanged glances. The consuming swarm was a threat that the Concordance had been monitoring for years. They were a species of insectoid creatures connected through a collective consciousness. They consumed entire worlds, stripping them of resources before moving on to the next. The Concordance had managed to contain them so far, but it was a constant struggle. "If the swarm encountered humans, we would see how they reacted," Thalaxis mused. "If the swarm feels nothing, it would prove our theory about the dread being tied to prey instincts." "Or the swarm would consume Earth," Venzar pointed out. "And humanity would be destroyed before we ever made contact." Before they could continue the discussion, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Thalaxis rushed to her communication console, her 4 arms moving rapidly across the controls. "What is happening?" Pikrin asked. Thalaxis felt her blood run cold as she read the reports. "The consuming swarm. They have broken through the containment zone. 7 star systems have already fallen. They are expanding in multiple directions." She pulled up a star map, and her heart sank. The swarm was moving on 2 fronts. One branch was heading toward the heavily populated core worlds of the Concordance. The other branch was heading toward Sector 447, toward Earth. "The humans do not know," Venzar said quietly. "They have no idea that the swarm is coming, and we cannot warn them because we cannot get close enough to communicate." Thalaxis stared at the map, watching the projected path of the swarm. They would reach human space in approximately 3 months. The Concordance military could possibly stop them, but it would take time to mobilize. Time they might not have. "We have to try," she said. "We have to make contact, warn them, and hope that humanity can defend itself." Over the next week, the Concordance tried everything. They sent automated probes with warning messages, but the probes lost contact as soon as they entered human space, either destroyed or malfunctioning. They tried tight beam communications, but received no response. They even attempted to send a message through quantum entanglement, but the humans either did not have the technology to receive it or did not understand what it meant. Meanwhile, the swarm continued its advance. Reports came in daily of worlds consumed, populations slaughtered, resources stripped away. The swarm moved like a plague across the galaxy, unstoppable and merciless, and humanity remained blissfully unaware in their isolated corner of space. Captain Maria Zhao stood on the bridge of the UESS Pioneer, reviewing the latest sensor data. They had detected unusual activity along the rimward edge of explored space. Energy signatures that did not match any known natural phenomena, movement patterns that suggested coordinated fleet action. "There is someone out there," she said to her crew, "and they are fighting something." "Should we investigate?" her first officer asked. Maria considered it. They had been exploring for 6 months without making contact with any alien species. Part of her wondered if they were being avoided deliberately. But why would an advanced civilization avoid them? "Not yet," she said finally, "but increase monitoring. If there is a conflict out there, we need to understand what we might be dealing with." Back on Concordance Station, Thalaxis made a decision that would change everything. She requested an audience with the High Council and presented a proposal that many considered insane. "I volunteer to make direct contact with humanity," she announced. "I will use heavy sedation, psychological conditioning, and every medical intervention available. I will force myself to overcome the dread and reach Earth." The council chamber erupted in argument. Council Director Venzar stood immediately. "You will die. Or worse, you will be driven mad. We have seen what happens to those who try to reach human space." "Then I will die trying," Thalaxis said calmly, "because the alternative is to let both humanity and the Concordance face the swarm alone. Divided, we will fall. Together, we might survive." "You think the humans can help us fight the swarm?" asked a council member from the Mechanical Collective. "They have barely achieved FTL travel. Their weapons are primitive. What could they possibly offer?" Thalaxis pulled up the data she had been studying for months. Human history, human warfare, human persistence. "They understand something we do not," she said. "They understand how to fight when all hope is lost. They understand how to win against impossible odds. And most importantly, they understand that sometimes the best weapon is not the strongest, but the most terrifying." She looked around at the council members. "The swarm has no fear. They cannot be intimidated, but perhaps they can be hunted. And if there is one thing humans know how to do, it is hunt." The vote was close, but it passed. Thalaxis was given permission to attempt contact, with the understanding that she might not survive the journey. Medical teams prepared a cocktail of sedatives, anxiety suppressants, and neurological dampeners. Psychologists worked with her to build mental defenses against the dread. Engineers designed a special ship with automated systems that could complete the journey even if she became incapacitated. 3 days before her departure, Thalaxis received a visitor. It was Krulvex, the Yargeth warrior who had come closest to Earth and suffered a complete breakdown as a result. "You are making a mistake," he growled. "I am a warrior. I have faced death 1,000 times without fear. But what waits near Earth is not death. It is worse. It is the feeling of being hunted by something you cannot see, cannot fight, cannot escape." "I know," Thalaxis said quietly. "I have read your report many times. But I must try." Krulvex studied her for a long moment. "Then I will tell you something I told no one else. When I was near Earth, in those final moments before my mind broke, I understood something. The dread is not a warning. It is a promise that if you become humanity's prey, they will never stop hunting you, never stop chasing you. They will follow you across the galaxy and beyond if necessary, because that is what they are. That is what they have always been." He leaned closer. "And Ambassador Thalaxis, when you meet them, you will understand that we are all prey. We have always been prey. We just did not know it until now." The medical team injected Thalaxis with enough sedatives to put most beings into a coma. She could feel them working, feel her anxiety levels dropping to barely measurable levels. Her mind felt wrapped in soft cotton, her thoughts moving slowly through a pleasant fog. "Final chance to change your mind," the head physician said. He was a tender, a species known for their healing abilities and gentle nature. His concern radiated from every gesture. "I am ready," Thalaxis said, though her words came out slurred. "Begin the journey." Her ship, named the Reaching Hand, was small and highly automated. If she became incapacitated, the computer would continue the journey and attempt to make contact on her behalf. The cargo bay was filled with gifts, cultural artifacts, and most importantly, a warning about the consuming swarm. The first jump went smoothly. At 40 light-years from Earth, Thalaxis felt nothing unusual. The medications were working. She actually felt optimistic. The second jump brought her to 30 light-years. Still nothing. She checked her vital signs. Elevated heart rate, but well within safe parameters. A few stress hormones, but far less than previous crews had experienced. At 20 light-years, she felt the first hints of unease. It started as a gentle pressure at the back of her mind, like someone watching her from just outside her field of vision. She increased her medication dosage. The pressure faded. At 15 light-years, the nightmares began even while she was awake. Shadows moved in corners where no shadows should exist. She heard breathing in the empty corridors. But the medications kept her functional, kept her rational. She reminded herself that none of it was real. At 10 light-years, she understood why so many crews had turned back. The dread was no longer a feeling. It was a certainty. Something was out there, and it knew she was coming. It was watching her approach, with patient, inevitable awareness. Every prey instinct she possessed screamed that she was flying directly into a trap. She injected herself with another dose of sedatives. Her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to hit the right vein. At 5 light-years, she began to cry. Not from sadness, but from pure animal terror. Her body wanted to flee. Her muscles tensed, ready to run even though there was nowhere to run to in the empty void of space. She strapped herself into her chair to keep from doing something irrational. At 2 light-years, she saw them, not with her eyes, but with that deeper sense that prey animals possess. The humans, millions of them on their little blue world, and every single one was a predator. She could feel them down there, living their lives, unaware that their mere existence was a source of cosmic horror to every other thinking being in the galaxy. She tried to speak a message into her recorder, but all that came out were whimpers. At 1 light-year, her mind began to fracture. She saw memories that were not hers, ancient memories buried in her genetic code, her ancestors fleeing from predators on their homeworld, the terror of being chased through forests, the helpless knowledge that the thing behind them was faster, stronger, smarter. The final moments as jaws closed around them. But through it all, one thought kept her going. The swarm. If she turned back now, both humanity and the Concordance would face the swarm unprepared. Children would die, civilizations would fall. She could not allow that. She forced her trembling hands to plot one more jump. The computer warned her that she was entering Earth's immediate space. She confirmed the command. The jump took only seconds, but it felt like falling through eternity. When she emerged, Earth filled her view screen. Blue and white and green, beautiful and terrible. Alarms immediately began blaring. Human ships were moving to intercept her. Weapons systems were powering up. They thought she was a threat. She tried to send a greeting, but her communication systems were malfunctioning. Too much interference. Or perhaps her own fear was making her hands too unsteady to operate the controls properly. Then something unexpected happened. One of the human ships pulled closer. A face appeared on her view screen. A human face, with forward-facing predator eyes and a expression that might have been curiosity. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Maria Zhao of the United Earth Space Command. You are in violation of Earth's defensive perimeter. State your intentions." Thalaxis tried to speak. Her translator was working, converting the human language into something she could understand, but her own words would not come. All she could do was stare at that face on the screen, that impossible face with its smooth skin and calculating eyes. "Unknown vessel, respond, or we will be forced to take defensive action." Defensive action. They would shoot her. She would die here, and humanity would never receive the warning. The swarm would come, and no one would be prepared. She forced herself to move, reached for her communication controls, spoke through chattering teeth. Concordance, diplomatic, vessel, I come to warn you. The human's expression changed. The eyes widened slightly. You're hurt. Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance? Hurt. Yes, she was hurt. But not in the way the human meant. She was hurt by their very existence, by the terror that their presence inspired. Not injured, she managed. Request, permission, to dock. Urgent, message. There was a pause. Thalaxis could see other humans in the background of the view screen, moving around, consulting with each other, making decisions about whether to trust her. Permission granted, Captain Zhao said finally. We're sending docking coordinates to your ship. Welcome to Earth orbit, Ambassador. Ambassador. The human somehow knew what she was, or had guessed. Thalaxis followed the automated docking procedures, her hands too unsteady to do it manually. The reaching hand settled into a docking port on a large orbital station. Through her viewports, she could see human ships all around her. Dozens of them, hundreds, so many predators. A docking tube connected to her airlock. On the other side would be humans, real humans, not just images on a screen. She would have to face them, speak with them, stand in the same room as them. Every instinct she had told her to seal the airlock and flee. Instead, she injected herself with one final dose of sedatives. Then she stood, straightened her diplomatic robes, and walked to the airlock on trembling legs. The airlock opened. On the other side stood Captain Maria Zhao and two other humans. They wore uniforms and carried no visible weapons. They looked small, fragile even. They should not have been terrifying, but they were. Thalaxis took one step forward and collapsed. She woke in a medical bay, human medical bay with human equipment and human doctors. For a moment she panicked, trying to get up, trying to flee. Easy, said a calm voice. You're safe here. You're among friends. Captain Zhao sat in a chair beside the medical bed. Up close, Thalaxis could see more details. The captain's face was kind, concerned. Her eyes were tired but alert. She looked like someone who had seen many difficult things and kept going anyway. I am sorry, Thalaxis whispered. I did not mean to be weak. Weak? Zhao shook her head. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Do you know how many alien ships we've detected out there? Dozens. They all get within a few light years and then turn around. You're the first one who made it all the way. That's not weakness. That's courage. Thalaxis felt tears running down her face. You do not understand. You cannot understand what it cost to come here. Then help me understand, Zhao said gently. Why does everyone run from us? And so Thalaxis explained. About the dread. About the failed contact attempts. About crew members driven mad by proximity to Earth. About the Yargeth warrior who curled into a ball whimpering about being hunted. Zhao listened in silence, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. I don't understand, she said finally. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We just want to meet our neighbors, to be part of the galactic community. I know, Thalaxis said. You are not doing it intentionally. But your species evolved in a way that triggers deep, primal fear in others. You are persistence predators. Social hunters, tool users, and somehow your presence carries a psychic weight that tells every prey species in the galaxy that they are being hunted. Zhao stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at Earth below. That's why no one answered our messages. They're all too afraid to get close. Yes. And you came anyway. Why? Thalaxis sat up in the medical bed, gathering her strength. Because there is something worse than the fear you inspire. Something that will kill us all if we do not work together. She pulled up the data on her wrist device, projecting images into the air. The consuming swarm. Worlds stripped bare. Populations slaughtered. The relentless advance toward both concordant space and Earth. They feel no fear, Thalaxis explained. They are a hive mind with no individual survival instinct. The dread that keeps other species away from you means nothing to them. They will reach Earth in approximately 60 days, and they will not stop until your world is consumed. Zhao studied the images, her expression hardening. What about your people, the Concordance? The swarm is advancing on 2 fronts, one toward Earth, one toward our core worlds. We can defend ourselves, but it will take all our resources. We cannot help you. You will have to face them alone. Unless, Thalaxis met her eyes, unless you help us, and we help you. But that would require human ships entering concordant space. It would require your people working alongside ours. I do not know if that is possible. Zhao was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. You know what humans do when we're afraid? We get angry. And when we're angry, we fight. If this swarm thinks they can come to our home and threaten our world, they're about to learn a hard lesson. She activated her communication device. This is Captain Zhao to Fleet Command. We have first contact and we have a situation. Authorize deployment of the Indomitable and all available warships. We're going to war. Over the next 3 days, Thalaxis watched in amazement as humanity mobilized for conflict. Ships that had been in dock for repairs were made battle-ready. Weapons were loaded, crews were assembled, and through it all, the humans moved with calm efficiency. She tried to explain the logistics of mixed crews, of having humans and aliens work together. But every attempt failed. When they brought Concordance volunteers to the human ships, the aliens could not function. Even heavily sedated, even with weeks of psychological conditioning, they could not overcome the dread. We'll fight separately then, Zhao decided. Your fleet defends your worlds. Our fleet goes after the swarm heading for Earth. We coordinate our attacks, share intelligence, but operate independently. Your ships are less advanced, Thalaxis pointed out. Your weapons are primitive compared to the swarm. You may not survive. Zhao's smile was cold and sharp. Ambassador, you said it yourself. We're persistence predators. We don't win by being stronger or faster. We win by never giving up. The swarm is about to find out what happens when they pick a fight with a species that doesn't know how to surrender. Thalaxis felt a chill run through her. In that moment, looking at the captain's determined face, she understood something new. The dread was not just about being hunted. It was about the certainty that once humanity decided you were their enemy, they would chase you to the end of the universe and beyond. The consuming swarm had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened humanity's home, and now they would learn what it meant to be hunted by Earth's children. There is one thing I must ask, Thalaxis said quietly. When this is over, if you survive, what will you do? Will you seek revenge on the Concordance for avoiding you? Will you be angry that we were too afraid to make contact? Zhao shook her head. No, I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt, knowing that everyone is afraid of us. But I understand it now. You can't control instinctual fear any more than we can control what we are. What matters is that you came anyway. You were terrified, but you came to warn us. That's what friendship looks like. She extended her hand. Let's survive this together, and then we'll figure out how to make this whole galaxy neighbors thing work. Thalaxis looked at the extended hand, a human gesture of trust and partnership. She was still afraid. The dread had not vanished. But she reached out and clasped the captain's hand in one of her own. Together, she agreed. And in that moment, an unlikely alliance was born between the most terrifying species in the galaxy and the species too afraid to approach them. The UESS Indomitable was humanity's pride, a massive warship built over 10 years of careful construction. It carried enough firepower to crack a small moon, and its crew of 3,000 represented the finest military minds Earth had to offer. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge, watching the final preparations as the fleet assembled around his flagship. 37 vessels in total: cruisers, destroyers, support ships, and the Indomitable herself. It was not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but it was certainly the most important. This would be humanity's first real battle among the stars. "Status report," Chen ordered. "All ships report ready for departure," his executive officer replied. "Weapon systems online. Jump drives calibrated. We can leave whenever you give the word." Chen nodded. In the corner of his bridge, Ambassador Thel-Axis sat in a specially designed chair, monitoring communications from the Concordance. She was still heavily medicated, still fighting the dread that humanity's presence inspired, but she had insisted on accompanying the fleet. "The Concordance fleet is moving to intercept the swarm's advance toward their core worlds," she reported. "They estimate contact in 5 days. And our target? The swarm force heading for Earth will reach the outer colonies in 12 days. We can intercept them in 7 if we leave now." Chen studied the tactical display. The swarm ships were represented by red dots, moving in perfect formation like drops of blood spreading across the map. Intelligence from the Concordance had given them some idea of what to expect, but nothing could truly prepare them for what was coming. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today we go to war, not for conquest or glory, but for survival, for our families, for our home. The swarm thinks we are easy prey. Let's prove them wrong. Fleet, jump on my mark." The 37 ships vanished from Earth orbit in pulses of twisted space-time. 7 days later, they made contact. The swarm fleet was massive, hundreds of ships ranging from small fighters to massive bioships that looked more like insects than spacecraft. They moved in complex patterns, following some collective intelligence that directed their every action. "All ships, battle stations," Chen ordered. "Weapons free. Remember your training. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and do not let up." The human fleet opened fire first. Railgun rounds traveling at appreciable fractions of light speed tore through swarm ships, punching holes through their organic armor. Missiles detonated in brilliant flashes, scattering debris across thousands of kilometers. Energy weapons carved burning lines through the enemy formation. The swarm responded immediately, returning fire with biological weapons that ate through hull armor like acid. The destroyer Valiant took 3 hits and went dark, life support failing. The cruiser, Determined, lost her starboard weapon batteries. But the humans did not retreat. Instead, they pressed forward, pushing deeper into the swarm formation. It was a tactic that would have seemed suicidal to most galactic species. The logical response to taking casualties was to fall back, regroup, reassess. But humans had learned long ago that sometimes the only way through hell was straight ahead. "Target their larger vessels," Chen ordered. "Take out their command ships." The Indomitable's main guns fired, each shot consuming enough energy to power a city for a month. The massive kinetic projectiles hit a swarm bioship at center mass, and the creature vessel exploded in a spray of biological matter. 3 more bioships moved to intercept, their weapons charging. But before they could fire, the cruisers, relentless and unstoppable, swept in from the flanks, catching them in a crossfire. 1 bioship died immediately. The other 2 tried to withdraw. "Don't let them escape," Chen ordered. "Pursuit pattern Delta." 6 destroyers broke formation and chased the fleeing bioships. It should have been impossible. The swarm vessels were faster, more maneuverable, but the human ships did not need to catch them immediately. They just needed to keep chasing. Aboard one of the destroyers, Captain Liu watched his prey trying to evade. The bioship was pulling away, but slowly. His ship was designed for endurance, not speed. They could chase this target for days if necessary. Weeks, even. "Send a message to that thing," he said with a cold smile. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Tell it we're coming. Tell it we will never stop. Tell it that running only delays the inevitable." His communications officer looked uncertain. "Sir, the swarm is a hive mind. They don't feel fear. They won't understand threats." "Do it anyway," Liu insisted. "Because maybe they don't feel fear. But I want them to understand what's chasing them." The message was broadcast. Simple, clear, relentless. "We are coming. We will never stop. You cannot outrun us. Surrender or die." The bioship did not respond, but its evasive maneuvers became more desperate. Back at the main battle, Thalaxis watched in horror and fascination. The humans were not fighting like any species she had ever observed. Concordance tactics emphasized precision, efficiency, and minimal casualties. You engaged the enemy, assessed their capabilities, and then chose the optimal strategy to defeat them with the least loss of life. Humans seemed to have a different philosophy. They hit hard, absorbed punishment, and kept coming. When one ship was damaged, others moved to cover it. When weapon systems failed, they rammed enemy vessels. When conventional tactics did not work, they improvised. She watched as the cruiser Defiant, having lost all weapons, accelerated directly into a swarm bioship at full speed. The impact destroyed both vessels, but it also created a gap in the swarm formation that 3 human destroyers immediately exploited. "Why did they do that?" she whispered. "They could have withdrawn, repaired, returned to fight another day." Admiral Chen heard her question. "Because withdrawing would have meant letting the swarm advance, and we don't let our enemies advance. Not toward Earth. Not ever." The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, the human fleet had lost 8 ships and taken heavy damage to a dozen more. But the swarm force had been shattered. Half their vessels destroyed, the rest scattered and fleeing in different directions. "Pursue them," Chen ordered. "All ships that can still fight, chase them down. Don't let a single one escape." Over the next 3 days, human ships hunted the scattered swarm vessels across a dozen star systems. It was exhausting, brutal work. But the humans refused to stop. They tracked their prey through asteroid fields, across nebulae, through dangerous regions of space that any sane captain would avoid. And they broadcast the same message with every pursuit. "We are coming. We will never stop." Something strange began to happen. The swarm, which had no fear response, began to avoid human-controlled space. Not out of fear exactly, but out of something else. Calculation, efficiency. The hive mind analyzed the data and reached a conclusion. Engaging humans cost more resources than it gained. The humans would chase swarm vessels until they ran out of fuel, until their ships fell apart, until they died at their posts. There was no profit in fighting such opponents. For the first time in its existence, the consuming swarm learned to flee from prey. Thalaxis reported this development to the Concordance Council. The response was stunned silence. "How is this possible?" Council Director Vensar asked. "The swarm has never shown avoidance behavior before. They consume everything in their path always." "Until now," Thalaxis said. "Until they encountered a species that refuses to be consumed. A species that turned the tables and became the hunters." She transmitted footage from the battles. The council members watched in silence as human ships chased swarm vessels for days without rest. They watched as damaged human ships kept fighting long after they should have been abandoned. They watched as the humans employed tactics that seemed to have no purpose except to terrorize their opponents. One particular piece of footage caught everyone's attention. A human frigate had been heavily damaged, its weapons offline, its engines barely functional. A swarm bioship moved in for the kill. The frigate captain did something unexpected. She broadcast every piece of human horror media in their database directly at the swarm ship. Images of human monsters, human killers, human nightmares. Then she rammed the bioship at full speed. Both ships were destroyed. but the swarm ships in the area immediately withdrew. "They are not just fighting," one council member observed. "They are teaching the swarm to fear them. Even though the swarm cannot feel fear, the humans are making them understand that engagement is unacceptable." Another council member spoke up. "But at what cost? The humans have lost thousands of crew members, dozens of ships. They are bleeding resources they can barely afford to lose. How long can they sustain this?" Thelaxis had asked Admiral Chen that exact question after the first battle. His response had been simple and chilling. "As long as necessary. We don't measure victory by profit margins or acceptable losses. We measure it by whether our home is still standing when the battle is over, and we'll pay any price to ensure that." On the Concordance front, the war was going differently. The Concordance fleet was more advanced, better equipped, and more numerous than the human fleet. They engaged the swarm with precise, calculated tactics. They won their battles through superior technology and careful strategy. But they did not inspire the same response. The swarm fought them with determination, trading losses for gains, calculating that eventually the Concordance would tire or run out of resources. It was a war of attrition, and both sides were bleeding. Then something unexpected happened. The swarm forces fighting the Concordance received data from the swarm forces that had encountered humans. The collective intelligence analyzed this data and made a decision. The swarm forces broke off their attack on Concordance worlds and redirected toward human space. "They are consolidating," Thelaxis reported to Admiral Chen. "All swarm forces are moving toward Earth. They believe that if they can eliminate humanity, they can then focus entirely on the Concordance." Chen studied the tactical display. The swarm was bringing everything they had. Thousands of ships, more than the entire human fleet could possibly fight. "They're making a mistake," he said quietly. "How can you say that? You are outnumbered 100 to 1. This force will overwhelm you." Chen smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Because they still don't understand what we are. They think this is about numbers, about firepower, about conventional warfare, but we don't fight conventional wars. We fight wars of will, and our will is stronger than theirs." He opened a channel to all human ships and stations. "All forces, this is Admiral Chen. The swarm is bringing their full strength against us. They want to end this war quickly. They want to crush us with overwhelming force. But I have a message for the swarm, and for every species in this galaxy that's watching." He paused, his expression hardening. "Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not break. You can shatter our ships, kill our soldiers, burn our colonies, but you cannot make us stop, because we are not fighting for territory or resources. We are fighting for our home, our families, our future. And we will chase you across every star in this galaxy if that's what it takes." He closed the channel and turned to his crew. "Send a message to the Concordance. Tell them to prepare for a counterattack, because once we break the swarm here, we're going to hunt down every last one of them, and we will not stop until the threat is eliminated." Thelaxis felt the familiar chill of dread run through her. But this time, it was mixed with something else, hope, because she realized that the galaxy's most terrifying species was on her side, and she almost felt sorry for the consuming swarm. They had no idea what was coming for them. Far across the galaxy, in the depths of swarm space, the collective intelligence processed the new data about humanity. For the first time in its existence, the swarm considered withdrawal, not from fear, but from cold calculation. The humans were inefficient prey. They cost too much to consume. They fought too hard, chased too long, refused to die when they should. But the collective intelligence had already committed its forces. Withdrawal was not optimal. The decision had been made. The entire swarm fleet set course for Earth. And humanity prepared to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a species that weaponized persistence itself. The swarm arrived in human space like a plague of locusts, thousands of bio-ships blotting out the stars. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as the enemy fleet emerged from FTL, their formation perfect and inevitable. Every tactical computer on every human ship ran the numbers and reached the same conclusion. Humanity could not win this battle through conventional means. Good thing humans rarely fought conventionally. All ships execute plan persistence, Chen ordered. The human fleet, what remained of it after weeks of running battles, did not charge forward to meet the swarm. Instead, they scattered in 37 different directions. Each ship became a solitary hunter, moving through space on seemingly random vectors. The swarm collective intelligence analyzed this behavior and found it inefficient. Scattered forces could be eliminated piecemeal. The swarm split its own fleet, sending groups of ships to pursue each human vessel. That was exactly what Chen wanted. Aboard the destroyer Relentless, Captain Hassan watched as 15 swarm bioships chased his vessel through an asteroid field. His ship was damaged, engines running at 70%, weapons down to half capacity. Any logical captain would have surrendered or fled to preserve their ship and crew. Hassan kept broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. Still here, still fighting. Come and get us. The swarm ships pursued. Hassan led them on a chase that lasted 6 hours, weaving through asteroids, using gravity assists from nearby planets, burning fuel at an unsustainable rate. His crew was exhausted, working triple shifts to keep the ship running. Then, just as the swarm thought they had him cornered, 3 other human ships appeared from behind a large asteroid where they had been hiding and opened fire. The swarm ships, focused entirely on their pursuit of the Relentless, were caught in a devastating crossfire. 7 bioships died before the swarm could react. The remaining 8 tried to regroup, but now they were the ones being chased. The 4 human ships pursued them relentlessly, giving them no time to coordinate, no chance to call for reinforcements. This pattern repeated across dozens of star systems. Human ships would flee, drawing swarm vessels into chases that lasted hours or days. Then, when the swarm was overextended and disorganized, other human ships would strike from ambush. It was not about winning individual battles. It was about bleeding the swarm, piece by piece, teaching them that every pursuit came with a cost. The swarm collective intelligence analyzed this new tactic and adjusted. They stopped chasing isolated human ships. Instead, they concentrated their forces and moved directly toward Earth. Chen had anticipated this. Phase 2, he ordered. All ships, converge on the defense grid. Earth's orbital space had been transformed over the past weeks. Every available ship, station, and platform had been armed. Minefields floated in carefully calculated patterns. Weapon satellites formed overlapping fields of fire. And at the center of it all, Earth itself, the blue-green world that humanity refused to surrender. The swarm arrived in overwhelming force. 3,000 bioships, more than enough to crack a planet's defenses through sheer numbers. They advanced in perfect formation, their collective intelligence coordinating every movement with inhuman precision. The human defense fleet numbered only 43 ships, counting vessels that probably should not have been in combat. Many were damaged, running on spare parts and desperate repairs. By any logical assessment, they could not hold. Then the swarm crossed into the defense perimeter, and humanity showed them what desperation looked like. Every mine detonated simultaneously, creating a wall of explosions that destroyed hundreds of bioships and damaged hundreds more. The swarm formation broke apart. Before they could regroup, the defense fleet opened fire with everything they had. Not at the swarm ships, but at specific points in space, creating overlapping fields of debris that the bioships had to navigate around. And while the swarm was busy avoiding obstacles, human ships attacked from unexpected angles. Small fighters, too small for the swarm to consider serious threats, swarmed the larger bioships. They carried single-use weapons, often just explosive charges. The pilots rammed their targets deliberately, each explosion taking out a bioship many times their size. Thelaxis watched this from the Indomitable's bridge, her body trembling despite the medications. "They are sacrificing themselves," she whispered. "Those pilots are dying on purpose." "They volunteered," Chen said quietly. "Every single one knew this was a one-way trip, and they went anyway because they know what's at stake." The battle raged for 18 hours. The swarm kept coming, kept pushing forward, kept sacrificing ships to advance toward Earth. The human defenses kept holding, kept fighting, kept making the swarm pay for every meter of space. Then something changed. The swarm collective intelligence, analyzing the data in real time, reached a conclusion. The cost of taking Earth had exceeded any possible benefit. Every bioship destroyed here was one that could not be used elsewhere. Every resource spent was wasted. For the second time in its existence, the swarm made a decision to withdraw. But humanity was not done. "All ships, pursuit formation," Chen ordered. "We're going after them." His executive officer looked at him in disbelief. "Sir, we've won. They're retreating. We should let them go and consolidate our position." "No," Chen said firmly. "If we let them leave, they'll rebuild and come back. We end this now. We chase them back to wherever they came from, and we make sure they never threaten anyone again." The battered human fleet pursued the retreating swarm. It should have been impossible. The human ships were damaged, low on ammunition, running on fumes, but they kept going. They chased the swarm across 3 star systems, harrying them constantly, giving them no rest, no time to regroup. The Concordance, monitoring the situation, sent a fleet to assist. For the first time, human and Concordance ships fought side by side, though at a distance that allowed the alien crews to function despite the dread. Together, they drove the swarm further and further back. 3 weeks later, the combined fleet cornered the remaining swarm forces in a dead system far from any inhabited worlds. The bioships were low on resources, damaged, their collective intelligence struggling to coordinate effective resistance. Admiral Chen stood on his bridge and considered his options. He could destroy them all, end the threat completely. It would be the tactically sound decision. The swarm had shown they could not be reasoned with, could not be trusted, would always be a danger. But he thought about what that would make humanity. If their first act in the galactic community was genocide, what message would that send? He opened a channel to the swarm. "Attention swarm, collective intelligence. You have 2 choices. Withdraw to your original territory and never expand again, or we will hunt every single one of you across this galaxy and beyond. We will never stop. We will never tire. We will chase you until your species is nothing but a memory." The swarm did not respond in words, but their ships began to withdraw, moving away from Concordance space, away from human space, back toward whatever dark corner of the galaxy they had come from. "Let them go," Chen ordered. "But keep monitoring. If they ever come back, we finish this." The war was over. 6 months later, a new station opened at the border between human and Concordance space. It was called Gateway Station, designed as a neutral ground where humans and other species could meet without the full effects of the dread. The station was huge, with separate sections that could be sealed off from each other. Humans stayed in their areas, aliens in theirs, with minimal direct contact. But it was a start. Captain Maria Zhao, promoted to admiral and made commander of Gateway Station, stood in the observation deck looking out at the ships coming and going, human vessels and alien vessels maintaining careful distance but sharing space nonetheless. Ambassador Thelaxis found her there. The Kalthari diplomat had spent the past 6 months working through her trauma, learning to function near humans without needing constant medication. It was still difficult. The dread had not disappeared, but it had become manageable. The Council wants to extend formal membership to humanity, Thalaxis said, with full rights and protections. But at a distance, Zhao said with a slight smile. Yes, at a distance. We cannot change our instincts overnight, but we can change our behavior. We can choose to work together despite our fear. Zhao nodded. It's more than I hoped for 6 months ago, when we were alone in space, wondering why no one would talk to us. You were never alone, Thalaxis said. We were always here. We were just too afraid to reach out. I am sorry for that. Don't be. Fear is natural. You came anyway. That's what matters. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ships. Then Thalaxis spoke again. The swarm has not been seen since the battle. We believe your threat was taken seriously. They know that if they expand again, humanity will come for them. Good, Zhao said. Let them remember. Let every species remember. Not because I want them to be afraid, but because I want them to know that if they threaten innocent people, there are consequences. The galaxy is still afraid of you, Thalaxis said quietly. That has not changed. I know, but fear and respect aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe eventually the fear will fade. Maybe in a few generations your people will be able to stand next to mine without feeling the dread. Perhaps. We have volunteers training now. Young people who have never experienced the swarm war, who see humans as the species that saved the galaxy rather than the species that terrifies them. It is slow progress, but it is progress. A chime sounded, announcing new arrivals. Through the viewport, they could see a transport ship from the Concordance worlds. It carried the first group of exchange students, young aliens who would study human culture and history at the station's educational facilities. Zhao watched them dock. You know what the hardest part is? Knowing that we scare people just by existing. We can't change what we are. We're always going to be persistence predators. We're always going to have that quality that triggers prey instincts. But you can choose what you do with that nature, Thalaxis said. During the war, I watched your species. Yes, you are terrifying. Yes, you are relentless. But you are also capable of mercy. You could have exterminated the swarm, but you chose to drive them back instead. You could have demanded tribute from the Concordance for saving us, but you asked for nothing except friendship. She placed one of her hands on Zhao's shoulder, fighting through the instinctive fear the contact inspired. That is what the galaxy will eventually remember. Not that humans are scary, but that humans are honorable. You are predators, yes, but you are predators with principles. Zhao smiled. I hope you're right. A young Calthari approached them nervously, part of the new volunteer program. She looked at Zhao with wide eyes, her body language screaming fear, but she bowed respectfully. Admiral Zhao, I am student Victara. I am here to learn about human culture. I am scared, but I want to understand. Zhao knelt down to be at eye level with the young alien. That's okay. Being scared is natural. But you came anyway, and that's what bravery looks like. Let me tell you something my grandmother used to say. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when you're afraid. The student nodded, still trembling but standing her ground. Come on, Zhao said, standing and gesturing for the student to follow. Let me show you around the station, and you can ask me anything you want. No question is too small or too strange. As they walked away, Thalaxis watched with satisfaction. It would take time, generations perhaps. But change was happening. Humanity had proven themselves to be more than the nightmares the galaxy feared. They were allies, protectors, friends. In her quarters later that evening, Thalaxis recorded a message for the Concordance Historical Archives. Today marks the official beginning of human concordance relations. It has been a difficult journey to reach this point. The dread remains. When I am near humans, every instinct tells me to flee. But I have learned that instincts can be overridden by choice. Humanity is the most terrifying species the galaxy has ever known. They are persistent predators who refined the art of the hunt over millions of years. They are social creatures who work together with frightening efficiency. They are tool users who turned warfare into a science, and they are beings who refuse to accept defeat under any circumstances. But they are also capable of kindness, mercy, and sacrifice. They feel love and loyalty as strongly as they feel determination. They create art and music and stories. They dream of a future where all species live in peace. The question I have asked myself repeatedly is, how do we reconcile these two sides of humanity? How can they be both terrifying and wonderful? The answer, I believe, is that they are not two sides at all. They are one complete whole. Their capacity for violence and their capacity for compassion come from the same source. Their absolute refusal to give up on what they care about. They will fight to the death to protect their loved ones, and they will work tirelessly to build a better future. Other species should know this about humans. If you threaten what they love, they will become your worst nightmare. But if you treat them with respect and friendship, they will walk through fire for you. No species enters human space without feeling the dread. That will likely always be true. But perhaps someday, beings across the galaxy will choose to enter anyway because they know that beyond the fear lies friendship with the most loyal species in existence. Humanity does not just defend their home. They defend their friends, and the galaxy is safer for having them in it. She ended the recording and looked out her viewport at Earth, the blue-green world that had seemed so terrifying just months ago. It still inspired dread, but now it also inspired hope. Because if humans and the Concordants could overcome their differences, if they could work together despite the primal fears that separated them, then perhaps anything was possible. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity was not a species to be trifled with, but they had also learned a more important lesson. Humanity was a species worth knowing. And in the end, that made all the difference. Far away, in the depths of space where the swarm had retreated, the collective intelligence processed what had happened. It had encountered something new, a prey species that became a predator, a species that weaponized persistence itself. The swarm would not forget. It would never return to human or concordant space, because some prey was not worth hunting. Some prey hunted back, and some prey never stopped coming.